Hi everyone, it's Gina K from Gina K Designs and your host of Stamp TV, and I'd like to welcome you to the second video in my quick and easy holiday series. Today's card is going to be a holiday tree card featuring the Warm Winter Wishes card kit. There are a couple of quick tips throughout the video, and I hope you'll give them a try. The stamps that I'm going to use for today's project are the Christmas silhouette stamps from the Warm Winter Wishes card kit and this Petite Flourish background stamp. I'm going to start with the Petite Flourish background stamp and a piece of red velvet cardstock. I'm going to use some Versamark ink all over this background stamp, and I'm going to use that to create some texture onto this red piece of cardstock. This is a great thing to do if you don't have an embossing folder or if you can't find one that matches the project the way you would like it to. So I use the embossing magic pad, and then I've put the cardstock down and a piece of paper on top, and I'm just rubbing all over the surface of this red piece of cardstock, making sure that every bit of that cardstock makes contact with the stamp underneath. This is an easy way to stamp background stamps and make sure that you get full coverage. Now I just folded this up and I'm using it to just lift that piece of cardstock, and I have my Petite Flourish background on this piece of cardstock. I'm using some of the Gina K Designs Fine Detail Clear Embossing Powder. I don't want this background to really get in the way of the project, but I did want to have a little bit of texture. So by using the clear powder, it doesn't make it very obvious that there's a pattern, but it creates some interest in the background. I'm using my Wagner heat tool to heat this embossing powder, and when it's all done, you'll be able to see there's just a faint background there, just enough to give a little interest to this card. And you can see how it shines when you turn it in the light. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the tree. And I'm going to stamp this tree on some grass green cardstock using a Versamark pad. So I'm going to use the embossing magic pad first, and then I'm going to place the tree down where I want it and pick it up with the door of my MISTI. Then using some Versamark, I'm going to ink up this stamp very well, making sure it's completely inked up, and then I'm going to stamp that onto the grass green piece of cardstock. Now for this one, I'm going to use embossing powder, but I'm going to use the Fine Detail Gold embossing powder. This one I really want to stand out. So by using the green cardstock and then embossing gold on top, it will really pop off my white background, and you'll see what I mean when I assemble this card. So I'm going to pour this Fine Detail embossing powder all over the tree, and then once again I'm going to heat it up using my Wagner heat tool. I like to get my Wagner heat tool a little bit hot first before I emboss. This way it will create less warping of my paper, and it's definitely going to make it easier to die cut this tree out if the paper isn't warped badly. So you can see how pretty that Fine Detail Gold looks on top of that grass green cardstock. Lots of shine. It's just very elegant. So now I'm also going to gold emboss a greeting. So I have a piece of vellum here, and I'm going to put my embossing magic pad over that piece of vellum. And then I'm going to use two of the small strip sentiments that are also in the kit. Now the first one is the Wishing You a Very Merry, and I'm going to place that using the grid that I can see through underneath. I have the MISTI mouse pad on my MISTI right now, but if you don't have that, you can use grid paper as well. Grid paper does come with the MISTI. So I'm just lining it up so it's straight on one of the grids, and then I'm picking it up with the door. Now I have another greeting that I got from the Winter Hugs set that's also in the kit, and it's the word Christmas. Now that I have the first one straight, I can place the Christmas greeting just pressed up against that one, and I just want to make sure that it's perfectly centered before I stamp it, and it was. So now I'm going to stamp it with the Versamark ink pad. Whenever you're doing more than one line of strip sentiments, if you have your first one all lined up properly, you can just butt the other ones up against it and they'll be nice and straight as well. So I'm going to sprinkle some of the fine detail gold embossing powder onto that greeting. And then again, with a very hot Wagner heat tool, I'm going to quickly emboss over that so that I don't warp that vellum. Now this is a heat-resistant vellum, so it does work really nicely, but you still don't want to lay on it too long with the heat tool because you can burn a hole through it. Now I'm just eyeballing my cut there just to make sure I have an even amount on top and on the bottom of the greeting. My next step is going to be to cut out an oval in the center of this piece of embossed cardstock. And I'm using the Gina K Designs double-stitched ovals, and this is the largest oval in that collection. Now I'm going to hold this down with a little bit of purple tape. I do want this to cut evenly because I'm not using the oval, but I'm using the actual piece of cardstock that's left behind. So I do want to make sure that it doesn't shift at all when I run it through my die cutting machine. By using the purple tape to hold it in place, it won't move at all. And then I'm going to take that oval out and I'm going to keep that for another project that I'm going to use at another time. So that's not wasted because that's really pretty and that can be used for something else. So next I'm going to make a die cutting mask of my tree. And I like to do this because this enables me to get perfect edges around the outside of my die cut piece. So I like to cut the die first using a contrasting color, and then I'm going to lay that on top of my tree with making sure that all of the borders around the tree are even. And you can see I tacked everything down with purple tape. And once I snap that tree into place, then I'm going to tape that down with some purple tape. And this way, when I run it through the die cutting machine, the tree die isn't going to shift and I'm going to get a beautifully even border around the outside. And once you cut one of these masks, you can store it with your die set, and you can use it over and over again. So once I run it through the die cutting machine, you're going to be able to see how even the border is all around that tree. So I'm going to remove the die and then pop that tree out, and you can see everything is perfectly even though that's a pretty intricate die. So my next step is to mount this frame panel onto my card base. Now I'm using some of the Gina K Designs white foam tape, but you can see I'm leaving an empty space on the sides. And that's because I'm going to slip my vellum greeting panel under there, and I want to make sure that it's open. So once I have all of my pieces of foam where I want them, I'm just going to peel off the little liners, and then I'm going to place that right into the center of my folded note card. And for this note card, I use the Gina K Designs Heavy Base Weight White. So now it's time to assemble this card. So for my tree, I'm again going to use some of that foam tape. You could use foam squares for this, but if you want to make sure that they are exactly the same height, it's kind of a good idea to use the same foam tape that you're using on the tree that you already used on the frame. This way they'll be exactly the same height. And you can see I'm just cutting pieces and placing them randomly on the back. And if they're too big, I'm going to cut a little bit more off, and I'm going to use that somewhere else. And you can also save those small pieces back onto your roll if you don't have anywhere else to use them. But this is looking pretty good. And this gives me lots of points of contact on this tree. So I'm going to place the tree right in the middle, and that's going to give it lots of dimension because it's popped up even though it's on the white part of the card base. Next, it's time to place my greeting. So I'm going to feed this vellum greeting strip through the sides that I left open, and I'm going to position it so that it looks straight and centered. Once it's straight and centered, I'm going to use a regular fountain pen, and I'm going to mark off where it comes right to the edge. And once I have that marked off, then I can slide that vellum out of there, and I can trim it just on the inside of the line that I drew. And you can see I'm trimming off both sides. Then I'm going to use a little bit of the Gina K Designs Dot Adhesive Runner just in a small little spot on each side. And that's on the front of the vellum. Now I'm going to slip that back under on both sides and make sure that it's positioned evenly. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure it's positioned evenly on one side and then press it down. Then put it into the right spot on the other side, and again, once that's in the right spot, you can press it down as long as it's straight and even. And once you press that down on both sides, the frame pulls the vellum back up so it doesn't curve as much. It's just floating right over that tree. So here's my finished card project, quick and easy to mass produce. Here are a couple of other videos I think you might enjoy, and I hope you'll hit the subscribe button so you never miss another video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.